My husband begged me to move cross-country to be closer to his family. I left everything behind. At the first family dinner, his mother stood up, clinked her glass, and said, "Let's welcome our son and the mistake he brought home." My husband just laughed. 3 years later, I sat in court watching him cry over divorce papers he never saw coming. I'm not a dramatic person. Never have been. I don't look for fights. I don't like making scenes. I just try to do right by people and keep my head down. That's probably why it took me so long to realize just how bad it had gotten. 3 years ago, I had a full life in Arizona. My name's Tara. I was 31, living in Prescott, working as a manager at a dental office. I had friends I trusted, family I saw every week, and a sweet 2-bedroom house that I'd saved for and bought myself. I even had a dog, June, a lazy black lab who followed me from room to room like a shadow. Then came Greg. We met at a dental conference in Flagstaff. He worked in equipment sales. He was from Boston but had been traveling a lot for work. The kind of guy who seemed comfortable anywhere. Confident, clean-cut, always knew what to say. When we first started talking, it felt like he really saw me. He asked questions, remembered things I said, laughed at my dumb jokes. We ended up sitting next to each other at one of the presentations and spent the next 2 hours whispering side comments and grinning like teenagers. After the conference, we kept talking. Then texting. Then late-night video calls. He came out to visit me a few times, and I flew to see him in Boston once. It was fast, yeah, but it felt right. He was 10 years older than me, and something about that made me trust him more. He said all the things I wanted to hear. He said he wanted to build a future. Start a family. Settle down. And after a year of long distance, he proposed. Looking back now, I realize I wanted so badly to believe I'd found the real thing, I ignored every red flag. He proposed on a hike in Sedona, just the two of us. It was beautiful. I cried. I said yes. We had a small courthouse wedding a month later, and we started planning our life together. That's when he dropped the first big ask. "I want us to move to Massachusetts," he said. "My parents are getting older. My dad's not doing well. I don't want to be across the country if something happens. I didn't want to leave Arizona. All my people were there." But he made it sound noble, like he was doing the right thing. He said, "You'll love New England. Real seasons. Family dinners. Cozy weekends. You'll fit right in." He said his family would love me. I believed him. I gave up everything. I sold my house. I quit my job. I said goodbye to friends who felt like sisters. My parents cried when I hugged them goodbye. I cried in the car with June curled up in the back seat while Greg drove us across the country like we were starting some great adventure. We pulled up to his parents' house 2 days before Thanksgiving. It was one of those old, stiff colonials on a hill with big white columns and black shutters. Cold. Perfect. It looked like something out of a Christmas card but with no warmth behind the windows. Mary Ann, his mother, opened the door wearing pearls and a sweater set. She didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She looked me up and down and said, "So this is Tara." Not a question. A statement. Then she looked at Greg and said, "Did you not tell her we dress for dinner?" I was wearing jeans and a sweater. That night, the house filled with people. Cousins, uncles, aunts. Everyone with the same sharp Boston accent and the same pinched look on their face like someone had just served them lukewarm soup. I tried to be friendly. I offered to help in the kitchen. Mary Ann said, "No, we're all set," and handed me a stack of napkins like she was giving a child something to keep her busy. Greg never left my side, but he never really had my back either. Every time his mom cut me off or made a weird comment, he'd give me this little smirk like, "Just ignore her. That's just Mom." After dinner, right before dessert, Mary Ann stood up with her wine glass and tapped it with a fork. "I just want to say how happy we are to have Gregory home," she said, smiling at the room. "And to welcome the mistake he brought with him." Silence. Then laughter. Some soft. Some loud. Greg chuckled like it was the funniest thing in the world. I stared at him. He didn't even glance at me. That was the moment something inside me changed. I didn't say a word. I just sat there and took it. But from that moment on, I started paying attention. I started writing things down in my head. The way Marianne would ask Greg about his real job and act surprised when I spoke about mine. The way his dad never addressed me directly, just asked Greg things like, "Is she working yet?" even though I'd gotten a new job within 2 weeks of moving. The way Greg would tell stories from his childhood and never include me in any part of his life since we met. The first Christmas, Marianne gave me a sweater 3 sizes too small and said, "I thought you were still trying to lose weight." Greg laughed again. I started pulling away. Not on purpose. Just slowly. Quietly. I stopped trying so hard. I spent more time with June. I started saving money from my job at the new clinic. I told Greg I wanted a joint account. He said no. "You're not good with money," he said. "Just let me handle it." I didn't argue. But I started putting away little bits of every paycheck into a new account he didn't know about. We stopped having sex. He didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. He was always working late. I stopped asking where he was. I stopped pretending I believed the excuses. The night I really knew it was over was our 2nd anniversary. I made dinner. He came home late. Didn't mention the date. Didn't notice the candles or the effort or the dress I put on. He walked in, loosened his tie, and said, "Any chance you picked up my dry cleaning?" I said, "Do you even know what day it is?" He looked confused. Then he said, "God, you're so sensitive." I went upstairs. He didn't follow. That night, I started researching divorce attorneys. I didn't file right away. I'm not reckless. I wanted to be smart about it. Greg controlled most of the finances. The house was in his name. I had my job, but I knew if I left without a plan, he'd spin it like I was unstable or ungrateful. His family already looked at me like I didn't belong. If I just walked out, they'd say, "See? We knew she was a bad fit." So I stayed. Quietly. I became a shadow version of myself. Polite at dinners. Smiling when I had to. Nodding through Marianne's insults. I even baked cookies for Greg's birthday and wrapped up some overpriced watch he'd been hinting at, just to keep the peace. But behind the scenes, I was building my escape. I opened a credit card in my name only. I started going to therapy, telling my therapist everything and asking for documentation of my visits. I printed out every text that proved how little Greg cared. Every dismissive message. Every insult. The time he texted, "Don't start with your drama again," when I told him I felt like I didn't matter. I even started recording some of our conversations. Nothing illegal, I made sure. In Massachusetts, it's a 2-party state, so I only did it when he knew we were talking on speakerphone or with witnesses nearby. I'd casually ask, "So you said you'd never put me on the house deed," just to get his answer. It was slow. It took over a year. In that time, I found out something else. He was cheating. I didn't want to believe it at first. I saw a text pop up on his phone one night while he was in the shower. Just a name I didn't recognize and a message that said, "Last night was perfect. I miss you already." I didn't confront him. Not then. I waited. I needed proof. Over the next month, I tracked everything. Times he left the house. Where he said he was. I called the restaurants he claimed he was at. I checked his mileage. One night he came home at midnight and said he'd had client drinks. I found the receipt in his coat pocket from a boutique hotel downtown. 2 glasses of wine. 1 room. Still, I didn't say a word. Instead, I got the receipts. I found the hotel's website and requested a copy of the folio using the confirmation number. I kept everything. The next twist came 2 months later. I got a call from my sister back in Arizona. My dad had a heart attack. I flew home immediately. Greg didn't come. He said, "I can't take off work right now." "Tell your dad I said feel better." My father was in ICU for 4 days. I stayed with my mom, held her hand, brought her coffee every morning. When my dad finally stabilized, I walked out of that hospital, sat in my car, and cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not just for my dad. But because I knew, fully, that I had no husband. Not really. I was alone in a marriage that had never really been mine. When I flew back to Massachusetts, I didn't go straight home. I went to a lawyer. She was sharp. Kind. Efficient. She asked all the right questions, looked over the file I'd spent a year building, and said, "This is solid. He won't see this coming." That was the point. I didn't want to fight. I wanted it to be clean. Swift. Done. So I planned it like a mission. I waited until he went on a business trip. The same hotel, same woman. I confirmed it by calling the hotel while he was there. I asked if I could leave something for my husband at the front desk. They said, "Room 412, correct?" I said yes. When he came back 2 days later, I was gone. The house was empty. My clothes, my photos, June gone. I left him a note on the kitchen counter. "Check your email." In his inbox was a PDF of the divorce petition, the hotel receipts, screenshots of the texts, and a typed-out list of things he'd said over the years. No insults. No anger. Just a list. Here's what you did. Here's what I did. Here's what happens next. I stayed with a friend. My lawyer filed the papers the next morning. Greg didn't respond for 5 days. Then came the calls. The texts. The voicemails. First angry, then desperate. Then something worse, friendly. Like nothing had happened. "I don't understand what's going on. We can talk about this. Babe, I'm sorry if I was distant. Work's been crazy." But I didn't reply. He sent flowers. Left a voicemail saying, "Don't do this. You don't know what you're doing." I knew exactly what I was doing. 3 weeks later, we stood in court for the first hearing. He looked tired. Pale. Confused. When the judge called our names, I stepped up. He shuffled behind me. That's when I saw him cry for the first time. He turned to me and said, "Please, Tara. Can we at least talk?" I didn't even look at him. I just said, no. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to scream. The revenge was already happening. And it wasn't loud. It was silent. And it was final. After the court hearing, things should have gotten easier. But Greg wasn't done. He started playing games. At first, he tried to stall the divorce. His lawyer filed for extensions. Claimed he needed time to review the documents thoroughly. Claimed some of the financials were incomplete. All nonsense. We had everything. But delays bought him time and he used it. He showed up at my new job one day. I was working the front desk at a pediatric dental clinic in Shrewsbury. He walked in like he had a right to be there, wearing a fake smile and holding a coffee. "Tara, can we just talk for 5 minutes?" I told him to leave. My boss stepped in. Greg left, but not before saying, "You don't have to do this. We can fix it. I'll talk to my mom." That made me laugh. Now he wanted to talk to his mom? The same woman who spent 3 years treating me like I was an embarrassing typo? But the real twist came the next week. I got a call from a woman named Carrie. I didn't recognize the name, but she said something that made my stomach drop. I think we've both been lied to. She was the woman Greg had been seeing. The one from the hotel. Turns out, he never told her he was married. She found out because he left his iPad at her apartment and she saw the emails about the divorce. She said my name sounded familiar, so she looked me up on Facebook. She told me everything. They'd been seeing each other for over a year. He told her he was divorced. That I was crazy. That I'd taken his dog and disappeared. He told her he wanted to marry her. Then she told me something else. I'm pregnant. I couldn't breathe for a second. I just stared at the wall while she kept talking. She wasn't calling to fight. She didn't even sound angry. Just exhausted. Broken. I'm not keeping it, she said quietly. I just thought you should know who he really is. I thanked her. We hung up. And then I went to war. I sent the screenshots of our texts. The hotel receipts. I sent her my wedding photos. Not to be cruel, but because she needed the truth. She replied with one sentence. Thank you for being honest. I forwarded the message to my lawyer. She added it to the file. Greg's credibility took a nosedive. He was now a cheating, manipulative husband who got another woman pregnant while we were still married. That helped a lot in court. But the real blow came 2 months later, when we subpoenaed his financials. Turns out, Greg had been quietly moving money out of our shared investments. Not enough to get caught right away, but enough to be shady. My lawyer dug in deeper. She found a second account under a different address. One he hadn't disclosed. It had over $24,000 in it. Hidden. That was fraud. We brought it to the judge. Greg tried to say it was a personal emergency fund. Said he didn't mention it because he didn't think it counted. The judge didn't buy it. Not only did I get my fair share, I got more. And Greg got sanctioned for hiding assets. The best part? His family finally found out. I didn't even have to tell them. Someone in town did. Marianne showed up at one of the final hearings and sat behind him, stiff and silent. Didn't say a word to me. But when Greg tried to approach me afterward, she pulled him by the arm and said, "Not here. Not now." I walked past them both without looking back. But it still wasn't over. The last stretch of the divorce was messy. Greg tried to get sympathy from everyone. He told his coworkers I had a mental breakdown. He told his family I ran off with the dog and emptied our accounts. He told his friends we just grew apart. But none of it stuck. Carrie, the woman he got pregnant, kept her word. She didn't keep the baby. But she told the truth when the court called her for a deposition. She said Greg promised her a future. Said he told her I was gone, out of the picture. She even had voicemails. Greg begging her not to ruin things by talking. That shut down any last chance he had of painting himself as the victim. By the time the divorce was finalized, Greg looked like a ghost. Thinner. Hollow. Tired. His lawyer barely spoke. Mine did all the talking. I got everything I asked for. Half the savings. A cash payout from the sale of the house. Full ownership of my car. I even got June listed as my property in the divorce. It sounds dumb, but I wanted it in writing. Just in case. When the judge stamped the paperwork, I felt nothing at first. Just quiet. Like I'd been holding my breath for 3 years and finally let it go. Greg looked at me when we stood up to leave. Eyes red. Lips trembling. He said, "You didn't have to destroy me." I said, "You did that all by yourself." Then I walked out. But here's the part most people don't hear. Even after all that, I still had to rebuild myself. I had to sit in therapy and unpack why I stayed as long as I did. Why I let myself be treated like I was invisible. Why I believed that love meant shrinking myself down so someone else could shine. I wasn't perfect. I ignored red flags. I said yes when I should have said no. I let someone else's comfort matter more than my own. That was on me. But I learned. I moved back to Arizona 6 months after the divorce. My old clinic took me back. I got a small rental house near my parents. June got older, slower, but still curled up beside me every night like she did back then. One night, about a year later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. It was from Greg. It said, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve any of it. You were never the mistake. I was. I hope you find someone who makes you feel like you matter every day." I didn't write back. I didn't need to. I'd already found that person. It was me.